Sometimes, the line between being seen and being ignored isn't marked by wordsits drawn in glances, in hesitation, in the way someone's smile fades the moment they look at you. Malcolm Rhodes wasn't expecting red carpets or recognition, just a room, a quiet place to let his son celebrate turning 10. But when a man walks into a place he owns and gets told to try the motel across the street, it's no longer just about rooms, it's about something deeper, something older, something that smells like old shame in a polished lobby. And maybe what hurt the most wasn't the refusal, but the look on his son's face when he asked, "Did they lose our room, Dad?" No one raised their voice that day. No one stormed off. But the silence? It roared. Because in that silence, a father made a choice, not to fight back with fire, but with something far harder to ignore. And what happened next didn't just change a reservation, it changed the entire house. The sun was beginning to lean west over the trees when Malcolm Rhodes turned off Highway 31 and followed the winding road toward Clearwater Lodge. The lake stretched wide and still to his right, the sky bleeding amber and blue across the water's surface. He hadn't planned this trip months in advance. No, it was a last-minute decision. But something about it felt necessary. The tires of his 10-year-old SUV crunched over the gravel loop that circled the resort. A fountain in the shape of a heron stood in the middle, frozen in motion, spouting recycled water as if time weren't real here. But Malcolm knew better. From the back seat came a yawn. "You awake?" he asked softly. Isaac rubbed his eyes. "Are we here?" Malcolm nodded, turning to meet his son's sleepy stare in the rearview mirror. "We're here, bud." Isaac leaned forward, trying to get a look at the lodge. It was beautiful in that over-designed kind of way wooden beams, stone pillars, and windows that caught the sun just right. The kind of place you'd see in a movie where everyone wore linen shirts and drank cucumber water. "Is this the one with the fire pit by the lake?" Isaac asked. "That's the one." Malcolm turned off the engine and stepped out, stretching his legs. His left knee popped the same one he'd injured when the platform collapsed during a maintenance check at the airbase years ago. The pain had dulled over time, but it never quite left, just like the other memories. He walked around and opened the door for Isaac, who grabbed his NASA drawstring bag and climbed out with quiet excitement. The boy's sneakers lit up with each step, a birthday gift from an aunt. Malcolm popped the trunk and pulled out their shared suitcase worn with fraying handles. He didn't care about appearances. He had stopped caring a long time ago. They stepped into the lobby together. It was colder than expected, air conditioning set to impress. The scent of citrus and wood polish lingered beneath the hum of quiet piano music. A couple in matching tennis outfits stood near the fireplace, sipping infused water. No one noticed them walk in. Well, almost no one. Behind the front desk, a young woman named Bethany Doyle looked up. Her makeup was perfect, dark eyeliner precise, lips a soft mauve. She was checking something on the monitor but paused as Malcolm approached. "Hi there," Malcolm said with a small smile. "Checking in. Rhodes. Malcolm Rhodes. Booked under Rhodes Properties." Bethany's expression didn't change, but something behind her eyes shifted. "I see," she replied, tapping her keyboard with deliberate slowness. "Do you have a confirmation number?" Malcolm hesitated. "Shouldn't need one. We booked directly through our partner account. I believe it was a corporate booking under Rhodes Properties." Bethany's fingers froze for just a second, then resumed typing. Isaac wandered over to a side table, flipping through a brochure on lake activities. Bethany pursed her lips. "I'm sorry, Mr. Rhodes, but I don't see any reservation under that name." Malcolm blinked. "Would you mind checking again?" "I did, and we're fully booked this weekend." She offered a tight smile, the kind you give someone right before sending them somewhere else. Malcolm exhaled slowly. "I see. That's odd. We confirmed it earlier this week." "Well, sometimes things slip through," Bethany said, eyes already moving to the next couple in line white, tan, and dripping in Columbia gear. "You might want to try Lakeview Inn down the road. They sometimes have overflow rooms." Malcolm said nothing for a beat, then turned slightly, looking toward his son. Isaac was watching. He hadn't said a word, but the look on his face confused, unsure made something in Malcolm's chest tighten. "Come on, buddy," Malcolm said. "Let's take a seat while I make a call." They moved to a bench near the stone wall that separated the lobby from the Lakeview Lounge. Malcolm took out his phone, dialed his office line, and waited. Isaac leaned against his side, small fingers tugging at a loose thread on Malcolm's sleeve. "Did they lose our room?" he whispered. Malcolm looked down at him. "No, I don't think they ever looked." That answer hung in the air. A voice came on the other end of the line. "Hey, it's me," Malcolm said calmly. "Can you pull the Clearwater booking file?" "Under Rhodes Properties. Should be for this weekend." "Yes, I'll hold." He glanced back at the desk. Bethany was laughing now, not unkindly, but easily, freely, chatting with the new couple. She handed them room keys with the fluidity of someone who wasn't second-guessing their place. Isaac tugged again. "Are we not staying here?" Malcolm's jaw clenched. "We are." A minute later, his assistant confirmed it. 5 nights. Room 305. Confirmed in the system. You should be on file. Malcolm nodded. "Thanks." He stood, his posture straightened without effort. Years in uniform did that. When he walked back to the desk, he noticed Bethany's smile falter, slightly. "Sorry," she said without prompting. Still, nothing came up. Malcolm's voice stayed level. "Are you sure you're looking under Rhodes Properties and not just my last name?" "I did," she lied, eyes already moving to her monitor again. Behind her, another staff member had entered. A man named Victor, wearing a subtle name tag and a beige sport coat, was observing from the printer station. His glance toward Malcolm was different, curious, aware. Malcolm stepped aside without a word. He returned to the bench, picked up Isaac's bag, and said, "Let's go sit by the lake a minute." Outside, the air was heavy with early fall warmth. They found a shaded bench near the dock. Malcolm watched the sun slide lower behind the lodge's pitched roof, watched as families unpacked SUVs, tossed beach balls into the air, passed by them without a glance. People didn't look at you when you didn't look like you belonged. Isaac traced a stick in the dirt, sketching shapes he didn't name. Why'd she talk to the other people different? Malcolm didn't answer immediately. He looked at the water instead. "Because sometimes," he said, "people see what they expect to see." Isaac looked up. What did she expect? Not us. Silence settled again. Malcolm sat in the back corner of the resort lounge, where the lights were dim and the windows faced the lake. The leather armchair beneath him creaked with every movement, but he wasn't moving much. Just watching. Just thinking. His phone rested on the table next to a half-finished bottle of water. He wasn't scrolling, wasn't checking emails, wasn't calling anyone back yet. The confirmation had already come through. His booking was valid. Room 305. Under his company's name, verified. Still, he hadn't gone back to the desk. Not yet. Isaac sat across from him on the floor, legs crossed, earbuds in, watching a space documentary on the cracked screen of a Kindle Fire. Occasionally, he looked up, watching his father's face for signs of what came next. Malcolm offered none. He was quiet, still, but inside him, everything felt like pressure, old pressure, familiar pressure. He knew this feeling. The slow tightening behind the ribs, the hum beneath the skin. He'd felt it at the airbase when the machinery failed. He'd felt it years earlier in meetings where he was the only black engineer in the room. And long before that, he felt it at 12 years old when a mall security guard followed him into every aisle of the bookstore and told him without saying it that he didn't belong there either. It wasn't rage. It was older than that. Quieter, heavier. It was the weight of being mistaken for something lesser and knowing you can't convince someone otherwise without proving a point they shouldn't have demanded in the first place. Across the lobby, Bethany was still behind the desk. She wasn't laughing anymore, but she wasn't looking over either. That was the trick. Once people sensed they'd done something wrong, they didn't offer an apology. They avoided contact. Malcolm wasn't going to call a scene. That was never the plan. But scenes had a way of writing themselves, even without raised voices. Victor, the other front desk staffer, the one in the beige jacket, had been glancing over every so often. Nothing invasive, just quiet recognition. He hadn't intervened earlier. Maybe he wasn't sure if he should. Maybe he was just reading the room. Malcolm noticed. He always noticed. He checked his phone again. A message from his assistant. It's in the system. I even called the vendor portal. Same info. Room 305 under Rhodes Properties. Want me to call the manager? Malcolm typed back. Not yet. Let's see what they do. He put the phone down and looked out the window again. The lake shimmered under the early evening light. Boats moved lazily along the shoreline. Kayakers, drifting like shadows on glass. Isaac stood up and walked over. Can we still go to the fire pit later? Malcolm nodded. Yeah, we're still staying. You sure? Malcolm looked at him then, and something about that question, that quiet, careful question, broke something soft inside him. Because his son wasn't asking about logistics, he was asking about safety, belonging. He was asking if they'd be turned away again. We're not going anywhere, Malcolm said. They sat together for another few minutes before Malcolm stood. He told Isaac to stay seated, then walked slowly back toward the front desk. This time, Victor stepped forward. Good evening, sir. Can I help you? Malcolm nodded once. I've been trying to check in under Rhodes Properties. Corporate reservation, 5 nights. Victor began typing. Bethany stood to the side, organizing paperwork that didn't need organizing. Malcolm didn't look at her. After a moment, Victor's expression shifted. Found it, he said. Room 305, 5 nights, deluxe suite. Malcolm raised his eyebrows. Imagine that. Victor looked up. I'm sorry for the confusion earlier, sir. Malcolm kept his voice calm. You're not the one who said the system didn't have it. Bethany didn't speak. Victor glanced her way but didn't push. Would you like help with your bags? No. I would like to speak to your assistant general manager. Victor hesitated. She may not be on site right now. Would you like me to check? Please. Victor disappeared into the back. Bethany still didn't look up. She stood there like a statue, still fidgeting with her stack of unnecessary receipts. When Victor returned, he looked a bit flushed. She asked if you'd be willing to wait or if she can reach out tomorrow. I'll wait. Malcolm didn't move. He simply stepped aside and returned to Isaac. They passed the time near the lake again. The fire pit was already surrounded by other guests' families, roasting marshmallows, couples with wine glasses. Malcolm didn't push through. He didn't need the space. He needed the principle. He and Isaac walked along the edge of the water. Isaac skipped a stone, badly, and it sank immediately. Dad, he said after a few moments, do you think they didn't give us the room because we don't look like the other people here? Malcolm didn't answer right away. I think they didn't give us the room because someone made a choice. But they could see your name, right? That it was your place? He paused. They saw what they wanted to see. That night, they finally entered room 305. It was beautiful. High ceilings, wooden beams, a window that looked out over the lake, and soft lights tucked into corners. The exact design Malcolm had signed off on when the renovation plans came across his desk a year earlier. Isaac flopped onto the bed with a loud whoa. Malcolm stood still for a second, staring into the space like he was testing it, like he was trying to determine whether it still belonged to him after what had just happened. He walked to the sliding doors, opened them, and stepped onto the balcony. The sky was turning violet. The lake was ink now, quiet and vast. He took a slow breath. His phone buzzed again. Another message from his assistant. Want me to call the regional office? He replied, not yet, but send the district director my number. Tell them I'm here until Sunday. Then he put the phone down and watched the reflection of the lodge in the lake. The next morning, Malcolm woke early, before Isaac, before most of the resort guests. He made a cup of the terrible in-room coffee and stepped out onto the balcony again. The air was crisp. Birds wheeled silently over the lake, and somewhere in the trees, a loon called out. By 8 a.m., he and Isaac were in the lobby. Isaac had dressed himself mismatched socks, a comic book t-shirt, and a wide smile. He was excited for pancakes. Malcolm wore the same kind of outfit as the day before. No brands, no statement, just clean and simple. Victor greeted them near the entrance. "Good morning, Mr. Rhodes. Your son enjoy the suite?" Malcolm nodded once. He did. They passed the front desk without incident. Bethany was there. She saw them, didn't speak. At the restaurant, the hostess, a young black woman with box braids and a clipboard, greeted them with warmth. "Table for two?" "Yes, please," Malcolm replied. She seated them near the window. The view was perfect. They ordered. Isaac picked pancakes with extra syrup. Malcolm chose a veggie omelet and more coffee. He watched the room without looking obvious. That was a skill too. A few tables away, an older couple, white, late 60s, was seated. As the hostess walked away, the man leaned over to the server and asked, "Could we move to a quieter table?" The only available table was next to Malcolm and Isaac. The server hesitated. The woman added, "Just somewhere with less activity." The word hung in the air like smoke. Malcolm said nothing. The server eventually walked them to another corner of the room. Isaac didn't seem to notice. He was drawing rockets on his napkin. But Malcolm noticed, and so did the hostess. A few minutes later, she came by quietly. "Everything okay over here?" she asked gently. Malcolm nodded. "We're good." She lowered her voice slightly. "I saw that. I'm sorry. They're known to be particular." He looked up at her. "You handled it well." She nodded once. "Let me know if anyone else gives you trouble." And then she walked away head high, posture firm. That, Malcolm thought, is what professionalism looks like. That's someone worth investing in. By 10:30, they were back in the lobby. Malcolm took a seat near the fireplace with his coffee. Isaac pulled out his headphones and settled beside him with a cartoon playing softly. Malcolm wasn't watching the show. He was watching the desk. A young man entered, maybe late 20s, wearing a dark suit, rolling a small carry-on. His posture was confident, but not arrogant. He walked to the counter and greeted Bethany. "Good morning. I have a reservation under K. Simmons. My firm booked it through the corporate portal." Bethany typed, then frowned. "I'm not seeing anything." He raised his brows. "Could you try again? It should have been submitted Wednesday." "I'm sorry. Nothing's here. Maybe contact your company and come back with a confirmation?" He paused, clearly embarrassed, then stepped away and pulled out his phone. That was the moment Malcolm stood. He walked to the desk and spoke to Victor. "Can I speak with your assistant GM now?" Victor blinked. "She's not in yet." Malcolm turned toward Bethany. "Are you sure about that?" Bethany's face went pale. Victor picked up the phone. "Let me check." Malcolm turned to the young man. "What company are you with?" "Treston Analytics," he replied cautiously. "They said it was booked through the corporate block." "Standard King?" "Yes." Malcolm nodded. "They booked it last week." "I know. Because I approved the contract myself." The man stared at him. "Wait, who are you?" "I'm Malcolm Rhodes," he said calmly. "This resort is mine." Bethany didn't move. Victor nearly dropped the phone. Malcolm didn't raise his voice, didn't point fingers, just looked at her quietly. "You saw my name yesterday. You saw my face. You chose not to connect them." Then he turned to the young man. "You'll have your room in 5 minutes." And to the hostess nearby, "Would you help him get checked in?" She nodded. "Of course." Malcolm returned to his seat, sipping his coffee. Isaac looked up. "Did you fix it again?" Malcolm exhaled. "Working on it." Because silence doesn't mean surrender. Sometimes it means you're just not done collecting evidence yet. It was just past noon when Carolyn Peters, general manager of Clearwater Lodge, returned to the property from an off-site meeting. She parked her hybrid SUV in the staff lot, unaware that her team had already crossed a line that couldn't be walked back. By the time she stepped into the executive wing, her assistant manager had briefed her. Twice. First, in a panicked whisper, then again in full sentences. The name Malcolm Rhodes had left her mouth with a tremble, as if just realizing what she hadn't known. Carolyn didn't wait for lunch. She sent a message straight to Malcolm's suite. "Mr. Rhodes, this is Carolyn Peters. General Manager at Clearwater Lodge. I understand there was an issue with your check-in. I'd very much appreciate the opportunity to speak with you personally. She didn't know what response to expect, if any. She received a simple reply. Available at 2:30. Executive Lounge. I'll bring my notes. That afternoon, Malcolm left Isaac watching cartoons in the room with a plate of strawberries and a bottle of root beer. The boy didn't ask where he was going. He just said, "Don't let them waste your time." Malcolm smiled, soft and crooked. Wouldn't dream of it. Downstairs, the executive lounge was empty, too quiet for hospitality. A tray of untouched croissants sat near a coffee machine that hadn't been cleaned since morning. A woman in her 50s stood near the window, arms crossed, looking not at the view but at her reflection. Carolyn turned when he entered. "Mr. Rhodes, Miss Peters, I want to begin by saying how sorry I am." "You can begin by sitting down," Malcolm said, motioning to the leather chair opposite him. "We'll get to sorry." She complied. He studied her. Tailored blazer, sturdy shoes, clean, unobtrusive perfume, the image of composure. But her hands twisted slightly in her lap, a crack in the armor. "Do you know who I am?" he asked. "Yes," she said. "You're listed on the ownership documentation through Rhodes Properties. You're our majority stakeholder." "And did you know that yesterday your staff denied me access to a room I had confirmed and paid for?" "I do now." "Do you know why?" Carolyn paused. "I believe, based on what I've reviewed, that they made assumptions. Based on your appearance, your clothing, maybe your presence with a child." Malcolm raised an eyebrow. Carolyn corrected herself. "They judged you by what they saw, not by who you are." "That's closer." He leaned back. "I didn't come here to be greeted. I didn't come for perks. I came because my son turned 10 this week, and he wanted to skip the zoo for a quiet place by the water. I chose this place because I believed in it, because I built it." Carolyn didn't speak. "And instead," he continued, "we were told to go somewhere else, somewhere more suitable. And if that were the end of it, maybe we'd have moved on. But it wasn't the end. I watched it happen again this morning. Different guest. Same pattern." She swallowed. "I've already spoken to Bethany Doyle. And she's been placed on administrative leave pending a full review." Malcolm stared at her. "That's protocol," Carolyn added. "But I realize that's not what you're here for." "No," he said. "It's not." There was a beat of silence. Malcolm leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Let me ask you something. What if I had walked in here wearing a designer suit? No child, last name, something more Anglo. What if I had a different skin tone?" Carolyn's eyes didn't flinch. "This wouldn't have happened." "There it is." He nodded, letting the truth settle between them like dust. "I'm not angry," he said. "Not anymore. Anger's easy, predictable, but what I am is clear. And clarity can be dangerous, because now I know exactly what needs to change." Carolyn straightened. "I'm listening." "Good. Then start by hearing this. I don't want damage control. I don't want talking points or diversity statements. I want accountability. And how do we begin? You hold a staff-wide meeting. Not a memo, not a link to a training video. You walk them through what happened. Names, choices, consequences. You use this moment as a case study. You show them what bias looks like when it's dressed in customer service." Carolyn nodded. "Understood." "Second," he continued, "you identify every guest in the last 3 months who had a reservation issue and didn't receive full service. You follow up, personally, not with discounts, not with comps, with phone calls and apologies." "Agreed." "And finally," Malcolm said, standing, "you ask your regional director to be present at the follow-up meeting, because I will be. And I want this story, this exact memento, be part of the training across every location we touch." Carolyn stood as well. "I can arrange that." "Good." He turned to leave, but then stopped. "Oh, hand Carolyn?" "Yes?" He looked over his shoulder. "Next time someone lets bias run your lobby, make sure it's not a Marine who owns the deed." He left her, standing there, blinking, breath caught in her throat. Word spread by evening. Victor approached him quietly at the lakeside bar, handing over 2 bottles of water and a wrapped pastry. "On the house," he said. "For your son." Malcolm nodded in thanks. Guests began to take notice too, not in overt ways, but in glances, in posture, in how the bellhop suddenly stood taller when he passed, how Bethany kept to herself in the back office and didn't return to the desk for the rest of her shift. Malcolm didn't want their discomfort, but he needed their awareness. That night, he and Isaac watched the stars from the dock. The boy pointed up at constellations he couldn't yet name. Malcolm just listened, wrapped in the sound of his son's voice, uninterrupted by judgment. For the first time since they arrived, the night felt clean. The next morning, Malcolm woke to a knock. He opened the door to find a man in a suit with a clipped name badge that read Gordon Presley, Regional Director. "Mr. Rhodes," Gordon said, extending a hand. "Thank you for making time. Let's not waste it," Malcolm replied. Inside the executive lounge again, Carolyn was already seated, a notepad in front of her. This time, the croissants were fresh. Gordon began. "First, allow me to apologize. What happened here doesn't reflect our values." Malcolm held up a hand. "You read the report?" "Yes." "Then you know this wasn't a fluke." "I do." Carolyn added, "We've initiated retraining. I've taken full responsibility for oversight." Malcolm frowned. "I didn't come here to hear about modules." They went silent. "I came here because this lodge was supposed to be different," he said. "It wasn't just a business investment. It was a promise to create a space that didn't ask people to earn their welcome." He turned to Gordon. "And you need to understand, this wasn't just one staffer making a bad call. It was a team silently affirming her choice. That's culture, not error." Gordon nodded solemnly. "Understood. I want this incident documented and distributed to training leaders chain-wide. Not a footnote, a case study. Let them read my name. Let them understand that people who look like me sign their checks." "And the staff?" Gordon asked. "Start with honesty," Malcolm said. "Don't cover. Don't cushion. People can grow, but only if they know what they did." Carolyn straightened. "We're holding an all-staff meeting tomorrow morning. Mandatory. We'll go over every detail, every decision." Malcolm didn't smile, but his voice softened. "Then we're moving in the right direction." Before he left the room, Gordon said one last thing. "You could have made this very public. Could have brought media, filed complaints. Why didn't you?" Malcolm paused. "Because I wasn't trying to humiliate anyone. I was trying to raise the floor." He opened the door, stepped into the hallway. Behind him, silence. But the good kind, the kind that meant people were finally listening. The following morning, Malcolm walked with Isaac along the path behind the property. It was quiet. The lake mirrored the clouds above. Somewhere in the distance, a loon called again. They passed the conference center. The doors were shut, but Malcolm could hear voices inside, staff murmuring, Carolyn's voice rising steady over the room. He kept walking. Later that day, as Isaac browsed the gift shop, Malcolm stood near the counter with a bottle of ginger ale. Bethany entered. She didn't wear the dark lipstick today. Her eyes were differently sharp, less sure. "Mr. Rhodes," she said quietly, "I wanted to apologize for how I treated you, for how I looked at you." He waited. "I've been thinking a lot about it. I assumed things I had no right to assume, and I can't undo it, but I'm sorry." Malcolm studied her face. There was no polish in her voice, no PR lines, just discomfort and truth. "I forgive you," he said. She looked surprised. "But I won't forget," he added, "and neither should you." She nodded once. "I won't." When she walked out, Isaac held up a tiny plush loon. "Dad, can I get this?" Malcolm chuckled. "A lake bird? That's your big choice?" Isaac shrugged. "It looks weird." "Perfect." He handed over a $10 bill and followed his son out into the daylight. As the door closed behind them, Malcolm let the silence fill the space again. Not the heavy kind from before. This one was lighter, like clarity, like the beginning of something better. The sun rose slow and golden over Lake Michigan the next morning, casting long shadows through the pine trees that surrounded Clearwater Lodge. The wind was soft, brushing the lake's surface like fingertips on silk, and Malcolm Rhodes stood at the edge of the balcony outside room 305, coffee in hand, shoulders squared against the quiet. Inside, Isaac snored lightly on the couch, one foot dangling off the edge, the stuffed loon tucked into the crook of his arm. Malcolm watched the water ripple. There was no anger left in him. That part had passage evaporated somewhere between the walk to the executive lounge and the moment Bethany Doyle said "I'm sorry" without being told to. What remained now was something else, something steadier, a kind of calm resolve, the type that doesn't need to declare itself, because it shows up in how a person moves through a space. It was never about revenge. He didn't want anyone fired for the sake of performance. He didn't want apologies written by marketing departments. He wanted awareness, and change that outlived him. At 8:30 a.m., he and Isaac made their way down to breakfast. The same hostess, Brielle, greeted them with a smile that wasn't just professional anymore. It was personal. "Back for round 2 of pancakes?" she teased Isaac. He grinned. "With extra syrup," she winked. "Coming right up." The dining room felt different. Malcolm could feel it before they even sat down. The tension was still there, but now it wasn't the kind that came from judgment. It was the kind that comes from recognition. From knowing who someone really is after pretending not to see them for too long. Victor walked by and nodded. "Morning, Mr. Rhodes." "Victor," Malcolm said, returning the nod. A few moments later, Carolyn Peters stepped quietly into the room. She wasn't making an announcement. She didn't ask for a table. She simply walked over and placed a white envelope on the edge of Malcolm's table. "Meeting happened at 7:30 this morning," she said softly. "Full attendance. Mandatory. I spoke first. No one left early." Malcolm didn't reach for the envelope. "Names, details, decisions," she continued. "Everything. I also mentioned your request that this be turned into a case study. The board agreed. Corporate wants to meet with you next week to begin shaping it." He nodded once. Carolyn hesitated. Some of them were uncomfortable. A few were defensive, but they listened, and it landed. "Then it's a start." She turned to leave, then paused. "You handled this better than I would have." "I didn't come here to be right," Malcolm replied. "I came here to show my son how to stand still when everything tells you to walk away." Carolyn's eyes softened. "Thank you." He didn't respond. Not out of coldness, just choice. She left the room, and Malcolm finally opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten copy of the meeting agenda, notes in the margins, and a personal letter. "We will not reduce your experience to a PR crisis. This will be part of how we teach, how we lead, and how we grow. You were invisible for a moment, but we see you now. And more importantly, we see what we've ignored. Carolyn Peters." Malcolm folded the letter and slid it into his pocket. Later that afternoon, Isaac begged to go to the game room by the marina. Malcolm gave him a 20 and said he'd meet him by the docks in an hour. Alone for the first time that day, he wandered the property. Not to inspect it, not to watch, just to feel what it had become. He passed by housekeeping staff who looked up now, not away. One young man, maybe 20, with earbuds in and a cart full of linens, nodded and said, "Mr. Rhodes, morning, sir." Not because he had to, but because he wanted to. Malcolm nodded back. He stopped by the front desk. Bethany wasn't there. Instead, a new face greeted him, nervous but eager. "Can I help you?" "No," Malcolm said gently. "I'm just walking through." She smiled, relieved. Outside, by the garden path, he noticed a small plaque had been added overnight, near the guest welcome sign. "Hospitality is not what we do, it's who we are. Clearwater Lodge welcomes all." It wasn't a solution, but it was a signal. As he walked past the outdoor fire pit, he saw 2 employees in the distance, one of them a maintenance tech, the other from food services. They were talking, heads close, one of them gesturing toward the lodge, toward the lake, toward him. He didn't stop them, didn't interrupt, Sometimes dignity is loud. Sometimes it's just being present long enough for people to confront themselves. That evening, he met with Gordon Presley once more this time, over dinner in the private dining room. Not a formal meeting, just a quiet exchange over rosemary chicken and warm bread. Gordon was less stiff now, less executive, more human. "I've reviewed the staff training archives," he said, "and you were right. Most of it is surface level, generic. But your story, this entire situation is different. It's lived in. We want to build something real out of it." "Then don't build it around me," Malcolm said. "Build it around the silence. The moment where someone knew what was wrong and didn't speak. That's where the rot is." Gordon nodded. "I've never had a conversation like this." "You probably haven't needed to," Malcolm said. "That's the point." He didn't say it with bitterness. He said it like fact. Gordon raised a glass of water. "To uncomfortable truths." Malcolm clinked his. "To the people who stay anyway." That night, back in the suite, Isaac sat on the floor drawing stars on a napkin with a resort pen. "Dad?" he asked. "Yeah? Are you famous now?" Malcolm chuckled. "Not even close." "Well, people keep looking at you like you are." "They're not looking at me," Malcolm said. "They're looking at themselves." Isaac tilted his head, trying to understand. Malcolm reached over, took the napkin, and pointed to the stars his son had drawn. "See that one?" he said, tapping the biggest one. "That's you." "Me?" "Yep. And the smaller ones? Those are people who got lost along the way. But when you shine right, you help them find their way back." Isaac smiled. The next morning, as they were packing, Isaac held up the stuffed loon. "Can we bring him every trip now?" "Every trip," Malcolm said. They loaded up the SUV. The staff had left a small brown paper bag at the front desk with 2 bottles of water, a granola bar, and a handwritten thank you note. Victor handed it over personally. "Safe travels," he said, "and thank you again for everything." Malcolm shook his hand. "Take care of this place." Victor nodded. "We will." As they pulled away from Clearwater Lodge, the trees rustled softly behind them. The lake, still and glassy, reflected the new morning without distortion. From the passenger seat, Isaac looked out the window. "Hey, Dad?" "Yeah? You think people can really change?" Malcolm considered the question. "I think people can choose to," he said. "And when they do, it changes everything." The road curved gently ahead, lined with pine and shadow. Malcolm didn't look back. He didn't need to. He wasn't chasing anything anymore. He had already arrived. The lodge looked almost surreal in the early morning haze, as if it had been cut out of a memory and placed gently back into the present. Isaac stood at the edge of the driveway, balancing on the stone curb, arms out like wings, pretending he could fly. Malcolm watched from behind the wheel, one hand resting on the steering wheel, the other holding his thermos. He hadn't started the engine yet. He was waiting, not for anyone in particular, just for the moment to fully settle in, the kind of moment that doesn't announce itself but leaves its fingerprint behind long after the noise fades. He looked at the lodge one last time. It was no longer the same place he had driven into 4 days earlier. The walls hadn't changed. The furniture remained. The lake still lapped softly against the dock, but the silence had changed shape. Now, when people passed through the lobby, they stood straighter not out of obligation, but recognition. The staff no longer whispered when he entered a room. They greeted him with the kind of quiet deference reserved for those who changed something without breaking it. He wasn't a ghost anymore. He was part of the story, and the story would stay long after he left. Just as he was about to call for Isaac, a voice called from the front doors. "Mr. Rhodes." It was Brielle's hostess with the box braids and the clipboard. She jogged over, holding a piece of paper with both hands like it might blow away if she didn't hold tight enough. "I'm glad I caught you," she said, slightly out of breath. "I thought you should have this." He raised an eyebrow. "What is it?" "A copy of the new floor directory. Went up this morning." He unfolded it, expecting room numbers, staff assignments, maybe a security extension. Instead, His eyes landed on a heading just above room 305. The Rhodes Room, dedicated in honor of those who quietly build what others try to deny. Malcolm blinked once, then again. Brielle added quickly, "It was Carolyn's idea, but all of us signed off on it." He folded the paper slowly, carefully. "Thank you." She hesitated. "You didn't ask for this. I know that." "No," he said, "but that's what makes it matter." She nodded. "We want people to remember, not just what happened, but what it meant." He looked at her, steady and warm. "Then you're already ahead of most places." She turned to leave, but before she did, she added, "I hope Isaac keeps visiting. I think the lodge needs kids like him." He smiled. "I think the world does." As they drove down the two-lane highway that carved its way back toward Minneapolis, Isaac munched on a muffin from the paper bag Victor had packed. He was humming something to himself, one of those untraceable tunes kids invent when they're half bored, half blissful. "Hey, Dad?" he asked between bites. "Yeah? Do you think we'll ever come back?" Malcolm kept his eyes on the road. The pines blurred past in the window. "We will," he said. "One day. Will the room still have our name on it?" Malcolm considered the question. "If it doesn't, we'll remind them." Isaac nodded, satisfied. Back in Minneapolis, the air felt different, less coastal, more grounded. The city greeted them with the dull hum of Monday live trash trucks, buses, someone's leaf blower 2 blocks down. Home wasn't glamorous, but it was theirs. Malcolm stepped into the kitchen and dropped his keys into the dish near the door. Isaac immediately kicked off his shoes and made a beeline for his telescope near the bedroom window. "Think the stars missed me?" he called. "They've been dimmer without you," Malcolm replied. He walked into the living room, sat on the couch, and picked up his laptop. Waiting in his inbox was an email from Gordon Presley. Subject: Rhodes Training Initiative, Corporate Proposal Draft. He opened it. Inside were slides, bullet points, an outline for a program that spanned 12 properties, each one referencing the Clearwater case. Each one using Malcolm's story not as a branding tool, but as a human example, a lived experience. He scrolled through the email until he reached the final line. "We hope to name the initiative after you, if you'll allow it." Malcolm sat back. He didn't type anything for a while. Then, finally, "Only if you promise this isn't about me. It's about the people who never got the chance to speak." He hit send. That Friday, Carolyn called him. "Corporate wants to fly you in for a leadership roundtable next month. Thought you should hear it from me. Will there be snacks?" She laughed. "Only the dry kind. Then I'm bringing my own." There was a pause. "Malcolm?" "Yeah?" "People are talking. In a good way. The story is spreading. Let it. Do you want credit for any of this?" Malcolm smiled faintly. "I already got it." She didn't press further. She didn't need to. 3 weeks later, a family checked into Clearwater Lodge. Black couple, early 40s, 3 kids trailing behind them, one of whom was carrying a saxophone case covered in stickers. They were greeted by Brielle. As she handed over the keys, she pointed toward the map of the lodge. "You're in the Rhodes Room," she said. The woman looked up. "Is that named after?" Brielle nodded. The husband glanced at his wife, and for a moment, nothing needed to be said. They just smiled, because they knew. In room 305, nothing had changed on the surface. The furniture was still sleek, the curtains still the same pale blue, but the air held something different, something warm, something watched over. The youngest child stood on the balcony, squinting at the lake. "Do you think the man who made this place still comes here?" His mother wrapped an arm around his shoulder. "I think he left something behind," she said, "so he never really left." Back in Minneapolis, Malcolm was sitting at a community center roundtable. Not on a stage, not behind a podium, just one of 20 men mentoring teens from nearby schools. Isaac sat beside him, legs swinging under his chair, drawing constellations in the margins of a worksheet. A young man across the table asked, "So, what do you do?" Malcolm thought for a moment. "I help people remember what respect feels like," he said. sometimes quietly. The boy nodded. That's cool. Isaac looked up and whispered, You forgot to say you own a hotel. Malcolm leaned in. Some things don't need to be said out loud, he whispered back. Before they left, a girl from the session walked over and handed Malcolm a folded note. I don't like talking in front of people, she said, but what you said, it made me feel like maybe I do belong somewhere. He took the note gently, nodded. You do. She smiled, then turned and walked off. Isaac looked at his dad. You do that a lot. What? Make people feel like they belong. Malcolm thought about that. I don't try to, I just try not to forget what it felt like not to. They walked out into the evening. Minneapolis was quiet again. A cool breeze teased the edge of autumn. Streetlights flickered on like fireflies holding still. As they crossed the parking lot, Isaac said, You think the Rhodes Room will still be there when I'm grown up? I hope so. And if someone else walks in and they don't believe he belongs? Malcolm looked down at his son. Then he'll show them what belonging looks like. They reached the car. Isaac climbed in, clutching his drawing pad like a passport to somewhere unseen. Malcolm started the engine. And as the headlights lit the path ahead, he smiled not because the road was easy, but because it was real. Sometimes, the most powerful kind of leadership doesn't walk in with a title, it simply shows up, listens deeply, and stands still when it matters most. Malcolm didn't raise his voice, he didn't slam doors or chase applause, he made space for truth, for accountability, for his son to see that dignity isn't loud, it's lasting. If this story moved you in any way, take a moment, reflect, then share it with someone who might need to be reminded that they too belong even in rooms built to forget them. And if you believe in the kind of stories that honor quiet strength and everyday courage, subscribe to the channel. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments, how this story made you feel, and where it met you in your own life. Because as Malcolm said, legacy isn't about names etched in stone. It's about what we leave in the silence when no one's watching and who finally feels seen because of it. We'll see you in the next story. Stay tuned.